And it's about time for Coingeek TV. Holy cow, Jimmy Wynn, I'm sitting here lost breath. I'm emotional. I'm excited about everything. The closing speech from Jimmy is world-renowned at this point. So thank you, everybody, for watching Coingeek Conference, New York, 2021. The conference itself is now over, but that doesn't mean that Coingeek TV is over. We're here to recap, talk about all the crazy stuff that happened, cover some highlights, and talk a little bit about the future. Holy cow, Dubai, everybody. I really, really hope that the world gets itself back to normal so that we can all hang out at luxurious desert resorts and all the rest of it. But announcements about that will be coming in the very near future. Until then, I am joined by what feels like an old friend at this point, Zach Resnick from Unbounded Capital. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Kurt. Happy to be here.
You have become a staple at these events. I feel like there's an unbounded guy, at least, at almost every BSV-related event. You and I have struck up something of a friendship, and I think you stand out amongst venture capitalists. First of all, you're younger. You're not what people picture as the crusty old VC, and I think that that's largely unfair, but I think you're helping to redefine it. I love your leadership in that space. I'd love to hear a little bit of your strategy. What makes you a unique investor in the space, both yourself as an individual and also as Unbounded Capital?
Well, appreciate that question, Kurt. And I'd actually like to start with poker and even have some poker chips here that we'll be talking about a little bit later. So at the firm, of me and my three other partners, of us four, two are kind of former professional poker players. Jackson Lasky, also the CEO of Unbounded Enterprise. Him and I studied poker together, played poker together, and launched a poker coaching, strategy, and events business. And I think the study of risk, the study of the Kelly criterion, and putting in lots of hours of making sure we're making quality decisions and not getting emotional in ways that don't serve us when we make our decisions has been really helpful to making good investments, really helpful to portfolio construction and kind of at a high level, how we think about things, and I think probably most importantly, to having the ability to think for ourselves and be unperturbed by what others think or what others do. And that's obviously a big part of kind of how we arrived at, focusing on scalable blockchains, today in 2021.
So speaking of thick skin and that sort of thing, I don't think that BSV BSV has probably the most attackers sort of socially and things related to it. I think largely because we're the most performant blockchain. But how do you deal with that as a business culture and saying, you know what, tune out the noise, we're on the right path? What do those sessions look like with you guys?
Well, it's really just a matter of making sure we're talking about the incredible businesses and entrepreneurs. There's a lot of other things to discuss when it comes to the history of Bitcoin that you do better than perhaps anyone, and other aspects of the BSV ecosystem. Where at Unbounded, as you probably see in the content and the webinars that you've attended, is we focus on kind of both the businesses that are actually building things today, not just our portfolio companies, and then where we see the future of our global financial system and the internet and how that will utilize Bitcoin and blockchain.
No, for sure. One of the things that stands out also with you guys is at an event like this, you've set up side events to first of all thank your greater family community of Unbounded people, but you're also educating other venture capitalists. I feel like that's got to be a crazy thing to talk to other people with more experience than you in various markets and things and start to say, hey, I see something that maybe you don't see. Here's what that is. What's it like talking to veterans of the venture capital business and talking to them about this disruptive technology?
Well, I think my experience with the VC community at large is very different than most in BSV, or at least the people that have the audience and speak about it in a loud way.
Yeah.
I think, for the most part, VCs are good at knowing what they're good at and what they're bad at, and will be the first to tell you that, we're going to make a ton of mistakes, we're going to miss a lot of things, and there's only just so much time in the day. And most VCs don't have the type of focus that we have, and that's both good and bad. I know a ton of incredible entrepreneurs building great businesses that are not using BSV or trying to utilize a scalable blockchain, and I can't invest in them or consider them that because we have a thesis-driven approach at our firm, where most VCs are kind of open to whatever, and even if they have a focus, they will spend time kind of going down different rabbit holes to educate themselves. So my experience with VCs, whether old or young, is that they're really eager to learn. And of course, there's a minority of them that kind of have a lot of the biases and misconceptions that the crypto consensus has. But even those that will come to one of my dinners or get to speak with me or someone on my team, I find by the end of that conversation, if we have the chance to have it, they're going to be interested in what's happening in the BSV ecosystem. Whether they'll write a check today, that's another conversation.
Yeah.
But I mean, even today, I mean, the announcement that Air Group led a round that had Jason Calacanis, arguably one of the most famous and successful angel investors and venture capitalists in the world. Yeah. So I think already we've made significant strides since our firm went from kind of a more opportunistic and broad crypto and blockchain firm to one that focused on scalable blockchains. But yeah, I find largely it's people asking good questions that are eager to learn. And I don't hold it against them that they're not looking at this and have only heard, say, about Solana or other so-called Ethereum killers, because that's who is in their social groups. So I think you do a great job of this as well, but we love putting on these investor dinners, and we recently did one in your new home in Miami and South Florida. We've done ones in Austin, LA, San Francisco. We have ones coming up in Denver. We have this, there's an event coming up in Puerto Rico this Saturday night. And yeah, I think, just leading with kind of social events to just have conversations with interesting people rather than leading with, I'm all about BSV has been a successful approach for us, not just with, other venture capitalists, but with other potential investors for our firm and other entrepreneurs. And yeah, I think the dinner on Tuesday was definitely a good example of, maybe 15 people from the BSV ecosystem, 20, 30, New York investors that maybe are looking to invest more in venture capital funds, doing interesting things like what we're doing at Unbounded, then maybe 10 to 15, early stage venture capitalists. And yeah, we look forward to continuing to put more things like that on.
For sure. It's funny because the reputation in BSV is, it's just Air Ventures in control of everything. But I always point out, and I say, well, have you looked at Unbounded Capital's portfolio? Because looking through your portfolio, it's the who's who of the BSV economy. Like, you've made strategic investments in things like Run Protocol or Handcash, and some of the stuff you're building out with Nifty Jigs and the spin-off stuff over at Unbounded Enterprise. And I always point people to that and say, hey, have you looked at this firm? And you're not the only other. There's 3 or 4 other significant firms that are doing work there. What's it like to cooperate with other VCs in this space, among people that do understand the technology? Are you guys looking to, I guess, what's the balance of cooperation versus competition in that regard?
So right now, there's not really, I'd say, much competition between the different firms. I think, we help each other in varying ways. And right now, we don't have 4 firms all with hundreds of millions of dollars under management that are all fighting each other to box each other out of deals the way that the kind of broader crypto consensus is right now, where there's hot projects, and once you're a hot project, everyone wants to kind of be in that project. Also, kind of just by nature of, if you're focusing on the BSV ecosystem today, you're a lot more likely to be contrarian, not just in your thesis, but also in how that applies to each specific company. So there are many companies where Air Group feels very good about that investment, and it's not the investment for us, and vice versa. And we think that's great, but ultimately, when we do want to help each other, and I think there's a lot of open arms. I think that will last to some degree, even as we all grow and scale, as I hope we all do. Yeah. But there definitely will be more competition, and I look forward to the day when there's a company building on BSV that is raising their seed round or Series A and raising $1 million, $5 million, and Air Group and Unbounded and other firms all want to lead the round, and then they get to decide. Yeah. We haven't had a ton of that yet. But I'm looking forward to as that increases. And frankly, I think there's going to be a lot more competition, not from within the BSV ecosystem, but from outside. I think that, while a lot of folks look at Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures and say, hey, you're looking at the wrong stuff, you're investing in these glorified Ponzi schemes, you're investing in things that won't really be of everlasting value, I think there's some truth to those criticisms, but ultimately, these firms have been incredibly good about being early to new trends. For sure. And while, yes, we might be earlier, I think it's much more likely that those firms, in 10, 15 years, are going to be written about as being very early to Bitcoin and blockchain, rather than perhaps the majority of firms in BSV today. And I think we need to, understand that and be ready.
Interesting. So do you see it as a good thing to have, let's say an Andreessen Horowitz jump in to perhaps,
course.
want to compete with you guys? Does it feel like, hey, this was our small pond, and now the big fish showed up, or is this a time to celebrate?
No, we want to change the world, and frankly, you can't do that without lots of capital and lots of experienced investors. While I'm very proud of what the BSV ecosystem has done today, those are very limited resources compared to what crypto venture capital looks like. And it makes me really sad that we're seeing literally hundreds of billions of dollars go into not even companies, but protocols and projects that are really just kind of these zero-sum or negative-sum games between different investors, rather than going into companies that are actually looking to make the world a better place. And I look forward as more capital kind of goes into that latter bucket, of which I think a lot of that will be within the BSV ecosystem.
So aside from your own work and some of the educational stuff that you're doing in those circles, how can we bring more people to things like Coingeek conference? I imagine if we were to bring people from Teal Capital or some of these places and say, hey, will you come look at what we're doing over here? I've never met somebody that came to a Coingeek conference and didn't feel like, oh, these folks are serious. How do we get them to come to these things? How do we bridge that gap of the sort of social struggles that we have?
Well, I think there's an interim step, and I've personally, I think probably brought like 20 to 40 people to this conference that, if they never came to one of my dinners or I didn't have the personal relationship with them, there's no chance they would have come.
Yeah.
But a lot of people were like, told me specifically that they told friends that they were coming, and their friends were like, what are you doing, wasting your time, blah, blah. You're only in New York for 4 days, and you're spending a day of it at Coingeek. What are you doing? It's like, no, well, I met Zach, and I met some of these other entrepreneurs, and really, I think there's something there. So I think perhaps as like an intern step, and I know, Paul and I are going to be chatting with someone about this, but, I think there's ways to do kind of both mini conferences and social events and really more investor-oriented social and educational gatherings that are in between kind of where they're at, and then kind of Coingeek where it's BSV all the time, that I think would be an interim step, and definitely happy to chat more offline about
For sure.
my thoughts on what I think that could look like.
So Unbounded Enterprise, it's Jackson kind of leading on that direction
Correct.
a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What's the strategy on things like Duro Dogs and some of the other stuff you're doing with the gaming and all of that? Because that seemed like a little bit, when it was announced 6 months ago or whatever, it was like, oh, that's an interesting segue for them. Are you involved in that at all, or is that like his baby and you guys?
Yeah, so I'm basically an advisor,
Okay.
That's the way it works. Is Jack is the CEO of Unbounded Enterprise, but he's still a partner at our firm and on the investment committee.
Got it.
And we think that him leading this, kind of I think one of the leading companies in BSV, helps us make better investment decisions, even if maybe I get a little less of his time than, say, a couple years ago. And then Dave, is a co-founder of Unbounded Enterprise and also a partner at Unbounded Capital, splits his time between the two orgs. And I think that, I want to first make a disclaimer that you should talk to Jack, and I encourage you to bring him on future things and podcasts to, discuss kind of the strategy there. But ultimately, Jack has a very similar vision to what I have, for what the future of the internet, what the future of gaming, what the future of payments looks like.
Yeah.
And the way that I'm helping to do that is by educating investors and helping entrepreneurs at the early stage across a portfolio do that.
Yeah.
And Jack is still involved in that in some capacity.
Sure.
But he's mainly doing that now by building those products himself and managing now a growing team of, I think, 12 people full-time today.
That's impressive. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's been under a year since launch, and I'm really proud of what they're doing. So I try to bring them customers and investors, and give advice, having started a lot of companies myself.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's really Jack's baby. Unbounded Capital is my baby, and we both help and support one another in a way that we think is synergistic, not just to our two companies, but also to the broader BSV ecosystem.
Well, and actually, I love that because about 2 years ago, when the enterprise blockchain conversation started to become like a branding thing in BSV, one of the things that I really wanted to see was gaming. Like it's easier to onboard a kid who needs to play a game, right?
Yeah.
Spends $5. You can get 1 million people to spend $5. You've got a lot of money on your hands.
Yeah.
And I love that Unbounded Enterprise is leading with games.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing. Was that something calculated, or?
So for probably almost a year before we started Unbounded Enterprise, we were like, okay, we're managing not all the capital in the world. We have so many ideas. We're all very entrepreneurial. Is the best way to see this change that we want to see really just all of us going all in on Unbounded Capital today?
Sure.
And we thought the answer is probably not, and we looked at all sorts of other different opportunities. We actually dove really deep into what healthcare could look like and how we could help healthcare companies use Bitcoin SV.
Sure.
And ultimately, after lots of market research, lots of conversations, that's kind of where we came to.
Yeah.
And even within, once Unbounded Enterprise officially launched, at the end of last year, there's still been some very significant changes and pivots like any early stage company.
sure.
But I think they've really kind of zeroed on something incredible today, which has implications not just for gaming, but really the future of payments on the internet.
For sure.